The argument began over something small, but it didn't stay that way for long. And by the time Santa realized what was happening, it had already turned into a moment she would never forget. The late afternoon sun filtered through the cracked windows of the old house, lighting up dust that floated lazily in the air, making everything look quiet and still, but the tension inside the room was anything but calm. Sana stood near the doorway, her hands slightly clenched, watching her older sister Hira move around with restless energy. Opening drawers, shutting them again, as if she couldn't stand being in the space for even a second longer than necessary. The house carried the weight of years, of memories, of effort that their parents had poured into it piece by piece. And for Sana, every corner meant something. But for Hira, it had become nothing more than a reminder of everything she wanted to leave behind. You don't understand, Hira said sharply, her voice cutting through the silence as she turned to face Sana, her eyes filled with frustration that had clearly been building for a long time. I can't stay stuck here anymore. Sana took a small step forward, trying to keep her voice steady even though her chest felt tight. It's not about being stuck, she replied. This is our home. The word home seemed to hit something in Hira, but instead of softening her, it made her expression harder. As if she had already decided that anything connected to this place was something she needed to reject completely. She let out a short, almost bitter laugh and shook her head. Home? She repeated, looking around at the worn-out walls, the faded paint, the small space that had never changed. This place is falling apart, Sana. It's been holding us back for years. Those words landed heavily. Not just because of what they said, but because of how easily Hira said them, as if the life they had shared here didn't matter anymore. Sana felt a rush of emotions rise inside her, but she held them back, trying to understand instead of react. Ami and Abu worked their whole lives for this, she said quietly, her voice softer now, but filled with meaning. For a brief second, something flickered in Hira's eyes. A hint of hesitation, but it disappeared almost instantly, replaced by determination. And that's exactly the problem, Hira replied, her tone firm. They stayed here, settled for this, and look where it got them. I'm not going to do the same. Sana stared at her, trying to process what she was hearing. Trying to connect this version of her sister with the one she had grown up with. The one who used to dream out loud about building something better, but never at the cost of leaving everything behind. So what? Sana asked, her voice slightly rising despite her effort to stay calm. You're just going to walk away from all of it. Hira didn't hesitate this time. He reached in too. Her bag pulled out a small set of keys and without a second thought dropped them onto the old wooden table between them. The sound was sharp, final, echoing louder than it should have in the small room. Take it, she said, her voice flat now, almost emotionless. Take this shabby house. I don't need it anyway. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore, and for a moment everything felt frozen. Sana looked at the keys, then back at Hira, waiting for some sign that this wasn't real, that it was just anger speaking. But there was no hesitation in her sister's face. No doubt. No regret. It was a decision, clear and complete. Sana's throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak. You're really leaving? She asked, even though the answer was already clear. Hira nodded once, quick and certain. I already have a job in the city, she said. A better place, better opportunities, a real life. I can't stay here pretending this is enough. That was the moment it stopped being just about the house. Sana felt it shift into something deeper, something personal, something that cut past the surface of the argument and touched something much harder to face and me. She asked quietly, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Hira paused just for a second, but it was enough for Sana to notice. Oh, you'll be fine, Hira said, her voice softer now, but still distant. You always manage. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't reassurance. It was an assumption, as if Sana's strength made her less important. As if she didn't need to be considered the same way, Before Santa could respond, Hira turned toward the door, picking up her bag, her movements quick. Like she didn't want to stay long enough to rethink anything. Stana watched her walk away, every step feeling heavier than the last, every second stretching longer as she tried to find something to say that could stop this. But the words didn't come. When Hira reached the door, she didn't look back, stepped outside, and pulled it shut behind her with a dull sound that seemed to settle deep into the walls. The silence that followed was overwhelming, filling every corner of the house, pressing in on Santa from all sides. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, then slowly turned her gaze back to the table where the keys still lay. They looked small, almost insignificant, but she knew they carried the weight of everything that had just happened. This wasn't just about ownership or responsibility. It was about being left behind, about being the one expected to stay, to fix, to carry what someone else had decided to abandon. Santa walked forward slowly and picked up the keys, feeling their cold metal press into her palm. She looked around the house at the cracks, the faded colors, the signs of time that had once felt like flaws but now felt like pieces of a story she wasn't ready to let go of. Her chest still ached. Her mind still struggled to accept what had just happened, but beneath all of that, something else began to form, quiet but steady. It wasn't anger, not yet, and it wasn't sadness alone. It was a feeling she couldn't fully name. Something that felt like both loss and resolve at the same time as the evening light slowly faded and the house grew dim. Sana stood there alone, holding the keys, understanding one thing clearly. Hira hadn't just left the house, she had left everything connected to it, including her. And in that moment, without saying a word, Sana realized that whatever came next would depend entirely on her. The first few weeks after Hira left felt heavier than Santa expected. Not because the house was difficult to manage, but because the silence inside it carried too many unanswered questions. Every room reminded her of what had been said, of the way those keys had hit the table, of how icily her sister had walked away without looking back. Still, there was no time to stay stuck in that feeling because the house demanded attention at every turn. The roof leaked the very next time it rained, water dripping steadily into a metal bowl Sana had placed underneath, the sound echoing through the night and refusing to let her sleep. The kitchen pipes groaned and failed, leaving her standing in ankle-deep water one morning, unsure whether to laugh or feel overwhelmed. The walls showed cracks she had never noticed before. And suddenly, everything Hira had said about the place being broken felt impossible to ignore. For a moment, doubt crept in, quiet but sharp, making Sana question if she had made a mistake by staying. Maybe Hira was right. Maybe this house was too much, too old, too damaged to be worth saving. But each time that thought rose, something pushed back against it. Something stronger than doubt. She would remember her parents working late into the night, fixing small things, saving money, making plans, believing that this place mattered even when it wasn't perfect. That memory didn't solve her problems, but it gave her a reason to keep going. So she started small, not with big plans, but with simple actions. She watched videos, asked neighbors for advice, and spent hours figuring out things she had never needed to learn before. The first time she tried to fix the leaking roof, she failed, leaving it worse than before. But instead of giving up, she tried again the next day, adjusting her approach, learning from what went wrong. Slowly the dripping stopped, and when it finally rained again without water seeping through, Santa stood in the middle of the room looking up, feeling a quiet sense of achievement that surprised her. That moment changed something. It wasn't just about fixing the house anymore. It became about proving to herself that she could handle what had been left behind. Each problem she solved made the next one feel less impossible. The broken pipes were replaced after hours of trial and error. The cracked walls were patched and painted, and the dull, lifeless rooms began to carry a sense of care they hadn't had in years. None of it happened quickly, and none of it was easy, But with each step, the house began to shift from something abandoned into something alive again. As time passed, Sana found a rhythm in her days. She worked during the day to support herself, saving every extra amount she could, and spent her evenings improving the house piece by piece. Some nights were exhausting, filled with frustration when things didn't go as planned. But other nights brought small victories that kept her moving forward. She stopped seeing the flaws as signs of failure and started seeing them as opportunities to build something stronger. Neighbors began to notice the changes. At first it was just curious glances, then small compliments, and eventually genuine admiration. People who once ignored the house started pausing to look at it, pointing out how different it felt, how it stood out in a quiet, steady way. Sana listened politely, but she didn't let it distract her, because she knew this wasn't about impressing others. It was about something deeper, something personal that she couldn't easily explain. Still, there was one thought that kept returning no matter how busy she stayed. It came quietly, often when she stood back to look at what she had done, or when she finished fixing something that once seemed impossible. She would imagine Hira standing there, seeing the house as it was now, seeing what she had turned it into. That thought carried a mix of emotions, part curiosity, part something sharper that she didn't want to fully admit. It wasn't just about wanting Hira to see the change. It was about wanting her to realize she had been wrong. That realization brought a new kind of tension into Sana's mind. She started questioning her own motives, wondering if she was doing this for the right reasons or if part of her was quietly building something meant to prove a point. The house was no longer just a home or a memory. It had become a reflection of her effort, her resilience, and perhaps her unspoken need for acknowledgement. Years passed in this steady rhythm, and the transformation became undeniable. The once worn-out structure now looked strong and inviting, carrying a warmth that drew people in without effort. It wasn't perfect, but it no longer needed to be. It had character, purpose, and a story that showed in every detail. Sana stood in the middle of it one evening, looking around at everything she had built, everything she had restored, and felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Pride, not loud or overwhelming, but calm and certain. Yet even in that moment, one question remained quietly waiting in the background. If Hira ever came back, if she stood here and saw all of this, what would happen next? Would Sana feel satisfied, or would something still remain unresolved? She didn't have the answer yet, but she knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, she would face it differently than before. Not as someone left behind, but as someone who had learned how to stand on her own. 5 years passed in a steady rhythm that reshaped not just the house, but Sana herself, and by the time that quiet afternoon arrived, she had stopped expecting anything from the past to return. She was in the front room adjusting a curtain when the low hum of an unfamiliar car broke the calm of the street, a sound too smooth, too polished for a place that had always been simple. Sana paused, her hands still, her attention pulled toward the window as a sleek car came to a slow stop right outside her gate. Something about the moment felt strange, almost unreal, like a memory trying to push its way back into her present. She didn't rush, didn't react quickly, but a quiet instinct settled in her chest, telling her she already knew who it was before the door even opened. When Hira stepped out, the contrast was impossible to ignore. She looked successful, dressed neatly, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who had built a life far from this place. Yet there was a subtle hesitation in the way she looked around, as if the street no longer felt familiar to her. Sana watched from inside for a second longer, taking in that small detail, noticing that the certainty Hira once carried didn't feel as strong anymore. Without overthinking it, Sana walked to the door and opened it before Hira could knock. Their eyes meeting in a moment that held 5 years of distance, silence, and unspoken thoughts. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. Hira's gaze shifted past Sana, slowly scanning the house, and the change in her expression was immediate. The surprise was clear, but it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost careful, as if she didn't fully trust what she was seeing. The cracked walls were gone, replaced with clean paint. The worn-out entrance looked inviting, and the entire space carried a warmth that hadn't existed before. "You did all this?" Hira finally asked, her voice softer than Sana remembered, missing the sharp edge it once had. Sana nodded once. Her response, simple. It just needed time. Hira stepped a little closer, her eyes still moving across every detail, trying to understand how something she had dismissed so easily had turned into something this complete. "I didn't think it could change like this," she admitted quietly. The words were honest, but they carried weight because they were exactly what Sana had imagined hearing for years. For a moment, Sana felt that old feeling rise again, the one that wanted acknowledgement, that wanted to hear clearly that Hira had been wrong. But instead of reacting, she stayed calm, letting the silence hold the truth between them. "You said it wasn't worth anything," Sana replied, her tone steady, not accusing, just factual. Hira lowered her gaze briefly, as if the memory of her own words had finally caught up with her. "I know," she said, her voice quieter now. "I was wrong." The apology wasn't dramatic, and it didn't come with excuses. It was simple, direct, and for a moment, that should have felt like everything Sana had been waiting for. But instead of satisfaction, there was a strange emptiness, as if the words had arrived too late to change what had already been built in their absence. Hira hesitated before speaking again, her confidence no longer as strong as it had been when she first arrived. "I didn't just come to see the house," she added carefully. "I needed to talk." Sana didn't interrupt, but her attention sharpened, sensing that this wasn't just a visit of curiosity. Hira took a slow breath, as if choosing her words more carefully than she ever had before. "Things didn't work out the way I thought they would," she admitted. "I chased something bigger, something better, but somewhere along the way, I lost more than I gained." Sana studied her face closely, searching for any sign of exaggeration or avoidance. But what she saw instead was something unfamiliar, a kind of honesty that didn't try to hide behind confidence. It made the moment heavier because it shifted the situation from simple right and wrong into something more complicated. "Why come back now?" Sana asked, her voice calm, but her question direct. Hira looked at the house again before answering, as if the answer was tied to everything she saw in front of her. "Because this is the only place that still feels real," she said quietly. "And I didn't realize what I had until I walked away from it." The words lingered, filling the space between them with a weight that couldn't be ignored. Sana felt her thoughts move quickly, not with confusion, but with clarity. This was the moment she had imagined in different ways over the years. The moment where Hira would return, where she would see the truth, where she would understand. And now that it was here, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a choice. She could remind Hira of everything she had said, every moment she had dismissed the house, every word that had made Sana feel small and left behind. She could close the door, deny her entry, and make her feel the same distance. She once created that path was clear, and for a brief second, it felt justified. But another thought pushed forward just as strongly, asking a different question. Would that really change anything? Would it undo what had happened? Or just repeat the same pattern in a different form? Sana stood there, looking at her sister, realizing that the power she had imagined for years wasn't in shutting her out or proving her wrong. It was in deciding what kind of person she wanted to be now. The house behind her stood as proof of everything she had built, everything she had become without needing validation from anyone else. That realization grounded her, giving her a calm she hadn't expected to feel in this moment. The tension didn't disappear, but it shifted, becoming something quieter, something more thoughtful. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what came next, and the choice wasn't as simple as she once believed. Sana stepped aside and let Hira enter, the gesture quiet but deliberate. signaling that the choice wasn't about dominance or revenge, but about control over herself and her own life. The living room that once felt empty now radiated warmth, sunlight bouncing off freshly polished floors and painted walls. Shelves lined with carefully arranged items, evidence of effort, care, and time invested. Hira walked slowly through the space, her eyes lingering on each corner, on every change, as if she were trying to memorize what had been rebuilt in her absence. For the first time, Sana saw hesitation in her sister's confident posture, a pause, in the assured steps that had carried her away 5 years ago. The words that had once seemed cruel and dismissive, "Take this shabby house. I don't need it anyway," were now present in her mind. But they carried a different weight as Hira looked around in silence, almost cautiously, like someone realizing for the first time the value of what they once disregarded. Hira finally spoke, her voice quiet and careful, stripped of any previous arrogance. "I didn't see it before. I thought leaving meant I was choosing something better. But now I see what I lost." Sana didn't respond immediately, letting the words hang, absorbing the tone and sincerity. This was not a dramatic apology, not a desperate plea. It was an acknowledgement that carried weight, the kind that comes when someone finally understands the impact of their actions without needing it spelled out. Sana studied her, noting the subtle shift in demeanor, the slight lowering of shoulders, the absence of the familiar defensiveness she had known. It was genuine, but that genuineness wasn't a reason to erase the past or pretend nothing had happened. She realized that Hira's presence was a test of her own boundaries. It's a chance to decide how she wanted to handle what had been done and what she had built in the years her sister was away. "I'm here because I don't have anywhere else that feels like home," Hira continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Eyes not meeting Sana's directly, but scanning the room again as if taking in all the proof of time, labor, and resilience. Sana recognized the truth in her words, and for a fleeting moment, Kochi considered every possible response, the sharp retort, the cold dismissal. The quiet satisfaction of letting Hira feel a fraction of the abandonment she had once endured. But something within her shifted as she looked around, remembering the late nights spent fixing leaks, learning to repair what was broken. Painting walls, restoring floors, and reclaiming the sense of purpose she had felt slipping away after her sister's departure. The house wasn't just a physical structure anymore. It was a testament to her endurance, her patience, and her ability to thrive without validation from anyone else. Even from the person who had walked away so easily. Sana finally spoke, her voice calm but firm, carrying a clarity she hadn't felt in years. "I won't forget what you said, and I won't pretend it didn't matter." Hira nodded, accepting the acknowledgement without defensiveness. Her expression softened, almost humbled. Sana continued, "But this house and everything I've done here isn't something you can come back to and expect it to be the same as when you left. It carries meaning now, meaning I built without you." The pause that followed was heavy with realization. Hira's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she didn't try to justify herself or defend her absence. She simply accepted the boundary that Sana had established, understanding that reconciliation, if it were to exist, had to be on terms of respect and acknowledgement, not convenience or entitlement. The moment settled into quiet understanding. Sana felt the weight of years of doubt, frustration, and effort ease slightly. Not because Hira had returned, but because she had made the conscious choice to define the terms of her own peace. She realized that revenge, the desire she had imagined, would feel satisfying, wasn't the same as reclaiming her life, her purpose, and her home. Growth, she understood, lasted longer than vindication. The house once dismissed as shabby, now stood as a symbol of her resilience. A reflection of the person she had become through challenges she had faced alone. When Hira finally left, that evening, the door closed with a gentleness that contrasted the slam of 5 years ago. Santa stood in the quiet house, surrounded by the tangible results of her effort, feeling neither the emptiness of abandonment nor the fleeting thrill of revenge. Instead, she felt a steady certainty, a sense of control over her life and choices, a realization that she hadn't just rebuilt a house, she had rebuilt herself. Every corner, every repaired wall, every small detail bore witness to her endurance and her strength. And that was something no one could take away, not even the sister who had once walked out without looking back. In that moment, Santa understood. That true satisfaction didn't come from making someone else realize their mistakes. It came from recognizing and honoring her own journey, her own achievements, and the peace she had carved for herself, standing firm in the life she had created, on her own terms.